Hello. So today, guys, we are going to go over SPACECAT. I'm going to give you a brief introduction. If you have not read Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain, you need to read it. You should read it before you watch this video. We're going to use that nonfiction piece as an example for our SPACECAT and what you need to do for your lit circles, like what's expected of you. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you are either the literary luminary, the collector, or one of those two. Those are the two that have to do the SPACECAT. So I'm assuming that you are one of those two roles. You're either the literary luminary or the collector. Not that we won't have SPACECAT appear in other situations throughout the year, but for right now, that's what I'm guessing is the situation with you. So SPACECAT is just another acronym to help you remember. We'll encounter a lot of acronyms. For instance, with your short answer response, you have ASE that helps you remember the format. With your rhetorical analysis, you're going to have SPACECAT. And then, of course, with your poetry, which will be coming up in another 6 weeks, you'll have TPERTist. But this is one that's going to help you understand rhetoric. We've been over the rhetoric terms. Hopefully you've watched that video. I know it's lengthy, so I'm going to try to keep this one short, but I want you to understand what you're doing with your lit circles. So the S stands for speaker. Who wrote the article? Who are they? This may require that you do some research, especially with these outside articles. For instance, in just a minute, I am going to look up. That can't be right. Her name's got to be Jessica Mitford. We'll see. I'm going to look that up. Maybe that's like where it was transferred over to PDF. And they, sometimes PDF, when they transfer from a Word document, it doesn't work well. We'll see. Maybe it is Jessica. It's a very unusual name. But I'm going to look up Mitford, the person who wrote Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain, and show you how to do that so that you know how to look up information about your speaker. You need to, what do you know about them? What do we not know about them? Does the text have a particular meaning because of who wrote it? So is there some kind of bias because of who wrote it? An example would be like the president giving a speech, a citizen sending a tweet, a newspaper staff writing an editorial. Those change depending on who's giving it. I mean, for instance, you're going to, well, maybe the president's not the greatest idea right now. But if a doctor comes to you and starts telling you about your illness, you're going to listen to that person and what they have to say. Whereas if just a random citizen is like, oh, it sounds like you have tuberculosis, you need to get this medicine, you may not listen to them as much since they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. So the speaker does matter. The P stands for purpose. There are only certain types of purposes. I don't want you to spend a lot of time on the purpose. Basically, you just need to decide whether this person is trying to simply inform you about the subject. They have no real end goal other than just to let you know what's going on. They want you to actually persuade you in some way to believe something or to do something, or maybe they want to inspire you to feel a certain way and finally to convince you. Don't pick entertain or write entertain. None of these pieces were written for that purpose, except maybe Scythe, and we're not analyzing it with SPACECAT. The audience, who is the actual audience? So whether you realize it or not, the way in which the article is written gives you lots of indications as to who the audience is. We're going to talk about this with Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain, but who is it actually directed at? Is it little kids? Is it adults? Are they educated? Are they uneducated? Is it people in the South? Is it people in the NFL? What's the group that this is focused on? So pay attention to that. I mean, it could just be people in general, like your examples with the TV viewers watching the debate. To say TV viewers, yes, that is accurate, but also if that's targeting people 18 and over, because it's targeting voters. So to be more specific, that would definitely be who that is targeting. The context, what's going on in the world when these articles or these pieces were written. We'll look and see at what time period Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain was written, and if there's anything that happened in the world that might have caused this piece to have interest at that time period. There may not be, but maybe there is. Exigence. Why did the speaker feel the need to write this piece? What force was pushing them to write it? What was behind their writing. Yes, their purpose is to persuade you or to inform you, but there's something behind that that caused them to feel the need to write that piece, and we will talk about that. A lot of times, exigents cannot always be deciphered, but if at all possible, you want to narrow down an exigence. Why now? Why did the speaker do it at this moment? Oops, backwards. Choices. So this is when you start looking at different choices they made, anecdotes, their process, metaphors, diction, things like that are included in this portion. And appeals, this is when you focus specifically on ethos, pathos, and logos, specifically, okay? So if you have forgotten what ethos, pathos, and logos are, go back to that rhetoric video, fast forward until I get to that section, and rewatch that, or take notes of that, or look at your notes, print off that handout. Tone, this is so important when it comes to rhetoric. It's important to all pieces of literature, but rhetoric, it really, really matters. The tone is the author's attitude throughout the entire piece of literature. Something that's very important to note about a tone is that it can change, and most of the time it does. There are some pieces where the tone remains the same all the way through. Now, when I say tone, I don't mean like if you say, oh, it's monotone, they talk like this the whole time. No, not monotone, not the way in which the pitch of their voice is. I mean, how they feel about their subject. It shows through whether you realize it or not. You definitely see it with Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain, and we'll talk about it when it gets to there. You do need to pick a specific tone, and I've given you a handout for that, which I'll show you in just a second. So that's SPACECAT. Basically, that's how you need to analyze it. The speaker, the purpose, the I think you should go through it back again. The speaker, the purpose, the audience, the context, the exigence, the choices, the appeals, and the tone. Okay, speaker, purpose, audience, choices, appeals, exigence, and the tone. Okay, so let's go in first. Let's look at this. This is what you should have read right here, this Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain. I'm not going to read it to you. It does have some high-level diction, but it is not overly difficult to analyze. As you read it, you should definitely be taking notes on it, highlighting stuff. Like I might highlight, alas, poor Uric, because to me, this alas, poor Uric is telling the reader that this is a comical tone. I mean, really, she's talking about the corpse. She's making fun of it. She's like, oh, poor Uric. I already see the tone right off the bat. So you need to be going through and highlighting and annotating this as you go, okay? And making yourself little notes as you go all the way through. As for your tone words, I have them in Schoology. I highly suggest that you print them. You have multiple possibilities for your tone words. Neutral, okay, sorrow, fear, worry, humor, irony, sarcasm, negative, attitude, negative or positive for this last one. These are not the only tone words that you can have. They are just a basic list that are narrowed down through how you think the diction plays out. If you think it's overall negative, maybe you think the tone relies here. If you think it's overall humorous or sarcastic, maybe you think the tone relies here or lies here. Same one with all of these. You can use the diction to help you decipher, and the diction really does matter, like what I just said with that opening, poor Uric. So once you go through and you've read the article and you've looked at all the pieces, the next thing that you need to do is start your official copy. Remember, with both the literary luminary and the collector, you have to have an official copy. The literary luminary needs their SPACECAT, the comparisons and insights in their official copy, and they also need to your notes will be written out. So that's the basic thing that the literary luminary needs. Now, something I want to show you that's a good trick for you. When you go into Microsoft Word and this page pops up, go to Search Templates and type in MLA. then hit enter. This brings up a paper that you can use. You don't need the actual research paper because we're not doing an actual research paper yet. So just the MLA style paper. Click create, and it's got everything right there for you, okay? So for your official copy, this would be perfect for you to use. Now, I will say you want it to say a different first page, so I'm going to delete this out right here because I don't want my page number on the first page. I don't want it on yours either. But because it's a different first page, when you scroll down, you see it's still here. So I'd add my last name to it. I'm also going to delete the stuff I don't want. Like, I don't need any of these charts or any of this stuff. This will take me a minute or two, but it won't take that long, and it will save you a ton of time with setting up your paper. I just highlight it and click the delete button. That's literally all I have to do. Now, for your official copy, I would recommend using headings for your paper. So obviously the first thing you want to do is you want to title it. Your title would, for your official copy, be your job title. So let's say that you are the literary luminary. Okay. And you put your name here, student name. You put my name here, Miss Merriman. The course number is your class period. Even if you're online, you have a class period. So English, let's say you're in third. And then finally your date, which today's date is October 9th. You'll probably be doing it at a different date, but your date. So your paper setup should look like that, and that's super easy for you guys. You don't even have to think. So then you hit enter. I'm going to create my subtitle, basically. I want to start with my SPACECAT. Right? Because that's the first thing the literary luminary needs. And I am going to give the title of the work. Now, keep in mind, with the literary luminary, you get to choose what your SPACECAT is over. So you can choose, you have two articles that you can choose from. One is Television, the Plug-in Drug, and the other one was On Being Crippled. So you can choose one of those two. If you are the collector, you still have choices because you have to find that outside article and do your SPACECAT over it. So I'm going to put the title of the article. The article I'm doing today is Behind the, I don't know how to spell formaldehyde. Sorry, guys. It's such a weird word. Formaldehyde curtain by, surely that is not her real name. I'm going to look this up in just a second. All right, and I'm going to kind of bold this SPACECAT, and I'm actually going to move it back over to the left so that, not italicize it, bold it, so that the reader knows that this is what I'm doing, right? And then I'm going to start with my S, my speaker, sorry. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look up Arfessica Mitford. So let's find out if that's her real name, right? So I'm going to go to Google. I don't want that. I don't know what this /next is. What is this? Fishing protection. Oh, well, maybe I do want that. Not right now, though. All right, so I'm going to go to Google, and then I'm going to type her name in. First, I'm just going to type her name in, and I'm going to see what pops up, right? See, it's Jessica Mitford. It even says she's an author. Let's do this. Behind the formaldehyde ooh. I'm going to do that. I've already typed it out once. And I'm going to say who wrote it. Yeah. So her name is Jessica Mitford. Also, just so you know, let's change this in here. Fessica. Just so you know, something that I just did, I don't know if anybody caught that, but it brought up information about her. All of the writers that you're going to come across are going to be, you know, pretty famous writers, unless you're the collector. If you're the collector, then I definitely would say go with looking them up. I am having all kinds of problems. go with looking them up by their first name. You know, you just type it in and you see what turns up, what you can find about them. They're all going to be writers. Some of them may be scholars or college professors who have written different stuff about it. But if you can't find them, Jessica Mitford, Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain, it brings up information about her, and I want that information. Let's go back to it. Written by Jessica Mitford. I'm going to put it back the other way. Who wrote Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain? So let's see what we can find out about her. So I'm actually going to click on this article, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to read about her. So it says that Jessica Mitford wrote The American Way of Death. So we know she's written other articles, a critique of the funeral industry. Oh, so she's written a lot of articles about the funeral industry. In this selection from the book, Mitford analyzes the twin process of embalming and restoring a corpse, the practices she finds most objectionable. So, Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain is actually an essay from a novel that she finds extremely objectionable. But because she has written about this before, it's pretty clear that she is going to have a lot of knowledge of it, okay? But she's also going to have a lot of bias towards it, okay? For instance, even right here, it says, for those who want to know, Mitford herself was cremated after death. So she does seem to have an aversion to the idea of Behind the Formaldehyde Curtain, to the whole situations. But, that's not all there is to her. I'm sure there's more that we could find out about her. So let's start just simple. Let's say what we do know. So I go back into my article and I start simple and I say, let's say her whole name first. We're going to say, I'm even going to make it more organized, guys. I'm going to include bullets. You're not required to do that, but I'm going to. Jessica Mitford wrote an entire book over the, what did they call it? Did I get out of it? Over the funeral industry. Called, what was the name of the book? The American Way of Death. I want to italicize this because it is a book. All right, so that's one thing we know about her. Another thing that I'm going to include because I feel like it's relevant, she was cremated herself. Her novel criticizes the funeral industry, but she would have had a lot of knowledge, as she would have had to research greatly the topic. You would continue in that strategy. Tell us what you know about her. I mean, how many kids did she have? How long did she live? What do we know about her? Is there anything about her life that we could decipher that would make her biased? Some authors, you'll find a lot of information. Some authors, you'll find a little bit of information. So definitely tell us what you know. I am going to go on past this. I will say at the end of it, you do need to add one note where you think, for instance, I would say, I believe she was clearly biased against I don't even know if you would say, if you've read the essay, I don't know if you could call it a common American funeral. Okay? And there could be reasons why, if you go in and look up her research and what happened to her, and what all she went through. But we will get to that. My phone is going off. Sorry about that, guys. When the time comes. So that would be the subject. And then, of course, we move on to the next thing, which is the purpose. This one would take very little time. I'm going to put my little bullets. First, I would say, based off the formaldehyde curtain, that her purpose is definitely to persuade you. maybe somewhat informing, but I really wouldn't include that. Somewhat informative, but overall it is too biased to not be persuasive. When I say bias, guys, it is clear that she does not like the funeral industry. Different things that she does throughout the entire novel. For starters, as she goes through and she talks about it, she says things like, there is some question regarding the legality of much that is done within the preparation room. So she implies that it's illegal, some of the stuff that they're done. She implies that a responsible member would do it. And I would actually use these quotes as my reference on the paper. So I would actually say something like, and now remember, I don't know if I've told you this. When you're doing MLA citation, you're going to count down 1, 2. So paragraph 2 is when she does it. She has the quote where she says that there is some question as to the legality of much that is done within the preparation room. And this quote essentially is in paragraph 2. So I'm going to put Mitford 2. I'm also going to include a little information. This implies heavily that embalming is borderline illegal. I'm going to tell my thoughts on it because I want to be able to include that the day of my discussion. And I would probably include 3 to 4 more things where I see that she's persuading the audience, where I both give that quote and then at the end of that quote, I explain my thinking there, why I chose it. I would do that all the way through. There's several of them. I would say at least 3 to 4 to help with that. So moving on, I'm trying to keep this video short, guys, is the only reason why. After you do purpose, you have context. So when was our article written? Let's look back at our paper, the stuff that we found. So it was written in 2003. I wouldn't say that there was anything major that could have attributed to it other than possibly, I want to say that, what year did the funeral industry receive criticism? I want to say it was around that time. You guys were awfully little, but it was around that time when, why don't we try this? What was happening in 2000, whoops, not 200, funeral industry. I want to say it was around that time that there was an issue in, I believe it was Florida, but it may have been Louisiana, where a funeral home, they discovered where they were actually dumping bodies instead of cremating them and various other things like that. And that kind of stuff creates a bad outlook and could serve as the exigence. You have several things that you could look into here. See, look, The Truth About Funeral Planning. This was published in 2000. So you have a lot of stuff happening. This says essentially that, let's see. And CNN is a credible source. Says that planning was a big trend around 2000. So basically, you've got a lot of people really moving heavily towards the funeral industry. So I would include that information. I also want to include where I got it from the CNN Money website. So I'm going to literally copy this quote. Oops. If I can get it to copy. I'm going to go back to my Word document. So I'm going to say, according to CNN Money, I've got to separate those out in 2 words. It's going to bother me. Around 2000. And I want to fix that so it actually looks like the rest of my wording. So I'm going to merge. Oh, let's do undo. Let's do merge. Prepayment and planning is a big trend. I'm going to change it a little bit. For those of you in class, you should be very familiar. But if you're online, if you need to change something in a quote for it to flow, all you have to do is put brackets around it. So I changed that is to was. Prepayment and planning was a big trend in the funeral industry. What's my takeaway? Basically, around the early 2000s, when this article was written, well, we'll go ahead and go with the article. It comes from a book, so I kind of wanted to change it. When this article was written, there was an increase in the number of people openly, knowingly, and willingly moving toward planning their funeral. Not only that, if you plan a funeral, they cost money, right? So you had a large amount of people spending money on their funeral. This definitely could have been served as the exigence, because this would have possibly pushed her into, you know, having that, doing that the whole thing, warning the people about the funeral industry. There could also be something personal that happened to her in her life. You would definitely have to research her more to know about that. But like I said, everything about this is going to require research. If we went to, say, another page on her, and just to see if there was anything else, let's see. Let's look just her up. Jessica. Jessica Mitford. All right, so we've got a decent amount of stuff about her over here. I'm just going to go to this very first one. Wikipedia is not a credible source, guys, but for time constraints, I'm just going to go here for right now. In the future, you should really, let's see if we can find another one. It's going to bug me. You should really look for a much more credible, like Britannica, much more credible. If you are unaware, it is very easy to change information on Wikipedia. All you have to do is create a free account, and then you can go in and change anything. You could go in and say JFK murdered his brother. And I mean, obviously at some point they'd probably catch it, but that's not what we're looking for. So this is a much better site. It tells us that it's written by the editors of the Encyclopedia Britannica, which we can actually get their information if we click on this little link. So it is much better for us. See, oh, there we go. All of their editors. For y'all's purposes, to save you time, because I don't want you to have to write all of these, you could just choose the first one. I'd be okay with that. But I'm going to go in and I'm going to read a little bit more about her. And in what all it tells us, that she was, her witty and irreverent investigations of various aspects of American society. So she did this a lot. She's the 5th daughter of a baron, so she came from money. Her first published book was over rebels. There doesn't seem to be anything that really kind of leads her there. But you would keep looking and investigating her. And that may not be it. But definitely at the time period, if she investigated stuff a lot of times, and I might even add that, she often wrote articles and or books over stuff within American society. The boom, I can't think of another way to word it right now, the boom in the funeral industry would have caught her attention and given her the need to write about it. So you could argue that the exigence to help the broader American society. I mean, you could argue that. So that was basic how you do exigence. Yes, it does oftentimes require research. All right, so once you get past your exigence, oh, did I already move? Oh, I skipped. Once you get past the context, then you move into the oh, I've totally jumped. I skipped audience. Sorry, I'm looking at this handout. So let's back up a little bit. Let's say that you skipped that, like I did. Sorry about that, guys. So I skipped audience. Let's add it in. Audience. The audience, in my opinion, is actually quite easy. First thing that you want to look at is vocabulary. If you have an extremely large vocabulary, high-level vocabulary, you're looking at an older audience for sure. And most likely they are at least somewhat educated. I wouldn't necessarily say that she is targeting high-level educated people, but she's not targeting unintelligent people by any means, because her vocabulary within this article is just too high level for her to be targeting a lower level audience. So I would definitely say it's an older adult. I don't think that there is a specific race. No specific race can be identified. Okay. Also, I would say no specific gender either. I don't think she's necessarily targeting males or females completely. You could say that she leans towards males. And my reasoning for that would, which I want to give reasoning for that because that's pretty vague. My reasoning for that would be on the, probably close to, where is it? It's close to the last page. She says that several times that they do different things for women and children. And this would definitely lean towards a pathos appeal to men. I'm not sure where it is. I'm trying to move fast, guys. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. All right. So it's like the third page. It's the top paragraph. Of course, I need to count paragraphs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It is the 9th paragraph. She says ideal for women and children. Of course, I want to give my reasoning behind this. She is clearly using pathos to argue or to reach a more sentimental male audience. I definitely could say you could argue that there, but it's how much that some of that will come down to how much you view the male audience as falling for that kind of stuff. I mean, it could be directed at women and children in that same way. So you'll just have to decide that as you go. So we then want to, we decided that it's an older adult. I would also say that this adult is educated. Maybe not highly educated, but definitely educated. I would go through, honestly, I'm trying to save time because I'm running out of time for this entire video. I would go through and I would cite specific examples. One thing I would definitely say would just be the vocabulary that she uses throughout the entire novel. It is not low-level vocabulary anywhere within any of it. I want to say I wrote something down at one point, but throughout the whole thing, it's pretty high level. So it's hard to believe that someone that is even saying consulting corpse or kin, I mean, that's a high level vocab. Corpse, kin. I might continue to make another list because basically what I believe is vocabulary is a clear indication that she is addressing an educated audience. Okay, So overall, that would serve as my audience. I'm sorry, then my context. Then I have the exigence, which really we've already done. So all I'm going to do is break this apart. I'm going to write E for exigence, and I'm going to bold it because that one we pretty much did. Okay. And then, of course, after exigence, I have the choices, appeals, tone, and so on and so forth. I will say, guys, this is the overall strategy that you need to follow. At this point, I'm pretty much out of time for this video. What you need to do is go through this handout that you have on tone, and you need to answer each one of these things and break it down and how it's done and what is to be said here. Who is the speaker? What is the purpose? All that good stuff. You need to have a clear organizational method. It doesn't have to follow mine exactly, but you need to have one. So please make sure that you do that. I hope this helps you. I know we didn't cover every single little aspect of it, but we did cover, I think, enough of it and the most difficult portions with the exigence and the audience and even how to search stuff up. With your choices, basically you're just going to look at stuff that you see in here. For instance, she uses a lot of enthymemes where she gives you two ideas. Like in the third paragraph, she says, not 1 in 10,000 has any idea of what actually takes place. Books on the subjects are extremely hard to come by. Essentially, what she's doing is she is giving you two ideas there. One, she's telling you that A, people are not educated at all on the subject of the funeral industry. B, there's no way to be educated on the subject of the funeral industry because it's so hard to find books. So the conclusion would be C, the funeral industry is bad. That is a perfect example of an enthymeme, and I would have included that in my choices. I would have wrote out that little quote, and I would have explained that enthymeme, the A, the B, the C. This is what I'm seeing there. So you definitely need to address that stuff and those aspects and include them. You also, of course, can look at figurative language, but don't ignore your rhetorical strategies and devices, things like enthymemes, syllogisms, anecdotes, stuff like that. Remember, your focus needs to be on rhetoric, not just literary terms in general. So when you start looking at the choices, you need to refer to your rhetoric handout. I would also say with tone, refer to this handout, pick a specific tone. I can tell you with the formaldehyde article, her tone changed. She started off comical and almost friendly, right? As she tells you about poor Yorick and da-da-da-da. And I would use that particular line and discuss that just like I did up here. Just like I went through up here. And at the end of my quote, I had this explanation portion. I would definitely include an explanation portion if you include quotes, which you need to do if you want full credit. But I would use that. I would also then discuss how basically her tone shifts. Probably around the second paragraph, she starts to get more serious. She starts telling you things that aren't legal. She says it's not quite legal. And she starts giving you more factual information about the state. So she's kind of left that jovial, funny nature that she had going, and she's moved to a more serious tone. I would say it then takes another shift. When you get to that second page and she says that line, let us part the formaldehyde curtain, her tone shifts completely. And she moves into an extremely judgmental and condescending, like meaning looking down her nose, tone. There is sarcasm through the whole thing, but definitely that is 100% there. She becomes almost, to use a word from your tone words, she becomes almost caustic. So caustic is kind of when you attack and go on the attack. And I would go so far as to say that one of the reasons why she does this, or one of the places that she does this, is when she talks about the unmolested body, implying that it's being molested if it's being embalmed, and so on and so forth. Of course, your different appeals are throughout. Anytime she appeals to emotions, it's pathos. Anytime she appeals to logic or reasoning, it's logos. So there's a ton of logos, right? Tons of logos, tons of facts, quotes for that, and explain how they're logos. There's also, of course, a lot of pathos. I would actually probably discuss the idea that this essay kind of pairs pathos and logos together, which is a weird pairing because it's weird to say that emotion goes with reason because typically it doesn't. But when she talks about women and children, that's pathos, that's emotion. When she talks about the most, she says in the third paragraph, the author points out that it would be most unusual for a responsible member of a bereaved family to instruct the mortician in so many words to embalm the body. So she's attacking the reader. And saying basically, if you are a responsible person, you wouldn't do this. And that is very emotionally driven. So don't forget about your appeals. That's later on. I think that is pretty much everything. If you have any questions, guys, let me know. Sorry I had to kind of cut this short, but I feel like overall you should get the idea of what you should be doing and how to do it. So I really hope this helps, and message me if you need help. All right, I'll see you on the next video.